أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى وسلم على سيدنا محمد سيدنا وسندنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا ومولانا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذرياته وأهل بيته ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. This is inshallah the last recording in this particular reading of the Matn of al-Akhḍarī. I didn't live stream it yesterday because I had a kind of a rough night. It was a very long day, and I rambled a lot in it, and I don't feel like it would have been conducive to the student of knowledge to learn from, just because the last part of the Akhḍarī, which is kind of one of its unique features, which has to do with how to retrieve the salat when mistakes occur or when forgetfulness occurs, which is inevitable. It starts to devolve into some kind of really detailed issues that a person has to kind of keep track of. And so between myself and the students and stuttering back and forth, I think that it would be better for the online audience to have a separate lesson. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and read what we read yesterday again, but in a way that is more conducive to the online experience, inshallah. For those of you who don't know, here at the end in the last lesson of this Matn, Ribat, from where we're teaching, it's a non-profit organization, and we strive to offer all of our classes at low cost or no cost at all. To be honest with you, I can't recall when we actually charged for a class. Sometimes I travel to other places at the invitation of people, and they'll charge for classes in order to cover expenses. So I don't give people a hard time about it, except for I insist that they don't charge a whole lot, something that's more than a reflection of the real expenses to put the event on, and that they always put some sort of a disclaimer at the end of their whatever poster or flyer advertisement, saying that financial aid will be available, or that preferably nobody will be turned away due to lack of funds. And that's really important to me, and it's important to the mashayikh I read from, and it should be important to you as well. So if you can't afford to support this work right now, then your moral obligation is to listen carefully, take notes, and to write and to benefit from it even more than another person might. If you are able to support, inshallah, then don't hesitate. Go ahead and go online, ribat.org/donate, and give. And for the rest of us, inshallah, just keep making dua, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all from His fadl. So we begin with masail having to do with the masbuq. The masbuq is who is the person who the Imam started the prayer and they weren't present. So they joined the prayer, albeit after a significant amount of it has passed, such that they missed at least one rak'ah of the prayer. والمسبوق إن أدرك مع الإمام أقل من ركعة فلا يسجد معه لا قبليا ولا بعديا فإن سجد معه بطلت صلاته. So the masbuq who joins the salat after the Imam has come out of the ruku of the ultimate, the last rak'ah, that masbuq, that person, that latecomer, if the Imam makes sajda sahu, whether it is qabli or ba'di, whether it's before his salam or after his salam, in either case, that masbuq is not going to, he's not going to make the sajda with the Imam at all. Why? So there's a couple of issues here. One is, like we mentioned before, that the masbuq in general, a person who's even missed just one rak'ah, in general, the sajda sahu ba'di, he doesn't do with the Imam. Rather, when the Imam says salam and then Allahu Akbar starts making sajda for his forgetfulness, that masbuq will get up and will finish the part of the salat that they missed, and they will make the sajda sahu after the salam, if it's after the salam. If, however, the imam makes the sajda sahu before the salam, then that masbuq will make the sajda with the imam, and then when the imam ultimately makes salam from after his sajda sahu and the tashahhud that accompanies it, then he'll get up and finish the part of the prayer he missed. In this situation, what's unique is that because the latecomer didn't catch even one raka'ah with the imam, in form he is praying and he is bound to the imam in the prayer he's in. However, he's not actually catching anything with the imam. Neither does he receive the reward of someone who's prayed in congregation, nor is any of the af'al, the actions of the prayer that he is making with the imam count toward his prayer, because none of it is a complete raka'ah. And so what happens is that in form, because he said Allahu Akbar, now he's in the sacrosanct condition of a musalli, of someone who's praying. And because he made the intention of following the imam, he's chained to the imam. Once the imam says salam, then the af'al, the acts of his prayer will begin. This, maybe will make a little bit more sense if a person thinks about the theory of the prayer in congregation, which is what? The Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, "Man innamal imamu liyutamma bihi," that a person who prays the prayer behind the imam, they pray behind the imam so that they can follow his lead. The idea is that the recitation of the imam suffices for the recitation of the follower, and this much is clear. Why? Because the إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ الْإِمَامُ لِيُؤْتَمَّ بِهِ, the context of the prophetic teaching on this issue is what? مَا لِأُنَازِعُ الْقُرْآنِ. The Prophet ﷺ complained that why is it that people are reading Quran behind me while I'm reading? Why is it that I find myself arguing Quran with Quran? And so the understanding is what? Is that the imam is the person who initiates or indicates when it's time to perform a particular act or say a particular thing or take a particular position or posture in the prayer. So he does his own qiyam, you do your own qiyam. He does his own sajda, you do your own sajda. He does his own ruku', you do your own ruku'. He does his own sitting, you do your own sitting. Whereas with the qira'ah, with the recitation, the imam recites on behalf of the congregation. And so what happens is that when you join the salat after the imam has come out of ruku', you don't catch even one raka'ah. And not catching one raka'ah means that what? You didn't catch any of the imam's recitation on your behalf. And the acts, you're doing them on your own. So you didn't catch one rak'ah worth of acts and you didn't catch any recitation. So in form, you're chained to the prayer because you started it, and in form, you're chained to the imam because you made the intention of following the imam. But in reality, what will happen is when he says salam, you just get up and say your entire prayer on your own. Even the reward of the prayer is in congregation isn't obtained by the person who prays like this. And I believe this is different than the Hanafi school. In the Hanafi school, as long as you catch the imam before the salam, you can be said to have joined the congregation, whereas in the Mālikī school, because you didn't catch any part of the prayer that doesn't have to be prayed over again alone, you're not said to have caught any part of the congregation, which is especially dire when it comes to Jumu'ah, the Friday prayer, because that can only be done in congregation. So when a person gets up, if they join the Jumu'ah prayer after the imam came out of ruku', then they make up dhuhr. They don't make up 2 rak'ahs for Jumu'ah. And so coming back to the issue at hand, the person who caught less than a rak'ah, he catches the imam after he's come out of ruku' in a congregational prayer. If the imam does a sajda sahu, whether it's before the salam or after the salam, you don't do any of that with him. If you make the sajda sahu before the salam with the imam, your prayer is invalid. Why? Because now you're doing something other than what your prayer is. Because your forgetfulness is not connected to his, because your prayer is only connected to his through a kind of a adverse ritual issue rather than actually praying the prayer that he's praying. If you got up and prayed theoretically the entire prayer and made sajda sahu after that, then the sajda sahu after that you did was completely superfluous. But because it's after you said salam from your own prayer, it shouldn't theoretically invalidate your prayer. But it was completely superfluous, and a person shouldn't do that on purpose because it becomes like a mockery then afterward of a ritual performance. وإن أدرك ركعة كاملة أو أكثر سجد معه القبلية وأخر البعدية حتى يتم صلاته فيسجد بعد سلامه. And so he then mentions explicitly the issue that we mentioned before, which is that if the masbuq, if the person, the latecomer, catches one raka'ah or more of the prayer with the imam, then when the imam does the sajda sahu qabli, the one that's before the salam for omitting a sunnah mu'akkada, then he will perform that with the imam because that's part of the prayer. And then after the imam salams out of his sajda sahu qabli, then he'll get up and make up the raka'ahs that he missed. Whereas the ba'di, because the ba'di is something that happens after the salat ended, it's an addition and an addendum, it's something tacked onto the prayer for the addition of a rukun or the addition of certain other things that don't belong to the prayer. In that case, once the imam says assalamu alaikum from his prayer ends, and then he'll initiate another act, which is the sajda sahu ba'di. You don't join him in the sajda sahu ba'di. Rather, you should get up and you should finish the part of the prayer that you missed. And then after your salam, then you make up also the sajda sahu ba'di. The sajda sahu, that's after the salam. Inshallah, that should be relatively clear. It's not one of the more difficult masail of this bab. فَإِن سَجَدَ مَعَ الْإِمَامِ عَامِدًا بَطَلَتْ صَلَاتُهُ. So in this case, in the case of a latecomer who joins the imam and then the imam does a sajda sahu ba'di, if the latecomer performs the sajda sahu ba'di with the imam before finishing his prayer, in this case, this is kind of like the inverse case of the issue before. In this case, he will invalidate his prayer. Why? Because once the imam says salam, he's obligated to finish his prayer because it's not done yet. And so if he joins the imam in the sajda sahu ba'di, what is he doing? He's leaving the actual prayer he's supposed to be praying right now. His prayer is not done yet, even though the imam's is, and he's doing something else. So we have one case in which the masbuq doesn't catch any raka'ah with the imam. If he makes a sajda sahu qabli with the imam, then his prayer breaks because he's doing something that's not part of his prayer at that point. In the inverse case, which is the latecomer that did catch something with the imam, he will make the sajda sahu qabli with the imam because it's also part of the prayer. Because he's following the imam, if it's part of the imam's prayer, it's part of his prayer. Whereas if the imam does a sajda sahu ba'di, after the salam, then if the latecomer joins the imam in doing that, he breaks his prayer. Why? Because the ba'di in any case is not part of the salat at all. Rather, it's an addendum onto the salat that is there to add something to kind of smooth over the fact that a person made a mistake due to not being able to sally forth the requisite amount of attentiveness to the prayer that they needed to. وَإِن كَانَ سَاهِيًا سَجَدَ بَعْدَ السَّلَامِ. So then the next case comes up, which is what? That the masbuq who caught at least one raka'ah with the imam, what if he went into the sajda sahu ba'di, the sajda sahu of the imam after the salam, but he didn't do it on purpose, he did it accidentally. So in the first case, if he did it on purpose, the prayer is invalid. In the second case, he did it accidentally. He didn't do it on purpose. Then that person added something to the prayer that they thought was part of the prayer that wasn't part of the prayer. And then because the general rule of additions to the prayer mandate a sajda sahu ba'di, that person has to then, after the imam is done with his sajda sahu ba'di, then that person will make ihram again, will say Allahu Akbar, continue his prayer again after this interruption, and then they will do their own sajda sahu ba'di after the salam in order to amend for their addition that they made. Now, there's a subtle difference here that a person has to keep in mind. And that subtle difference is what? Is that there's a difference between forgetfully joining the Imam and purposely joining the Imam in the sajda sahu ba'di, but out of ignorance. And so the forgetfulness is what's forgiven, the ignorance is not. The problem with the ignorance is that you don't really know about it until you know any better. So if a person has issues with this, they should probably talk to a mufti. But theoretically speaking, if a person thought that that's how you're supposed to pray and they did it on purpose, that they did the sajda sahu ba'di with the Imam on purpose, without knowing that it invalidates the prayer, then it should theoretically still invalidate the prayer. وإن كان ساهيا سجد بعد السلام, like we said. وإن سهى المسبوق بعد سلام الإمام فهو كالمصلي وحده. So if the masbuq, if the person who's the latecomer to the prayer made a mistake of forgetfulness in the prayer, in the part of the prayer that they're making up after the Imam salamed out, in the part of the prayer that they pray alone. In that case, all the rules of sahu, all the rules of forgetfulness in the prayer apply to that person in the same way they would have applied to a person who's praying on his own. وإذا ترتب على المسبوق بعدي من جهة إمامه وقبلي من جهة نفسه أجزأه القبلي. And then if the masbuq has sahu, has forgetfulness that occurred in the prayer in such a way that it is that it mandates a sajda sahu after the salam from the side of the Imam and before the salam from himself, then that person will just make one sajda sahu before the salam, and it will suffice for both sets of forgetfulness. And so there's a couple of issues at play here. One is the idea that anyone in general, whether it's a masbuq or whether it's a person who's a follower of the Imam, or whether it's the Imam, or whether it's a person praying alone. In general, anyone who is mandated to make sajda sahu because of two or more different acts of forgetfulness that will mandate both the qabli and the ba'di, both the sajdas before the salam and after the salam, then the making the sajda before the salam will suffice for all of the above. So you don't have to make sajda sahu once before the salam and once after the salam. So that's one principle that's at play in this issue. The second principle that's at play in this issue is what? Is that what we just read, which is that a person who has forgetfulness during the part of the prayer that they missed with the Imam, which occurred while they were making it up separately from the Imam, then that person will treat that forgetfulness according to all the same rules as if they were just praying alone. And so what happens is, what is the mas'ala he mentions? He says, إِذَا تَرَتَّبَ عَلَى الْمَسْبُوقِ بَعْدِيٌّ مِنْ جِهَةِ إِمَامِهِ وَقَبْلِيٌّ مِنْ جِهَةِ نَفْسِهِ أَجْزَأَهُ الْقَبْلِ. So if the masbuq has owes a sajda sahu after the salam from the side of his Imam and before the salam from his own side, then the sajda sahu before the salam that he makes will suffice for both of them. What if he has a sajda sahu that he owes from the side of the Imam, which is qabli before the salam, and a sajda sahu that he owes from his own side, which is a ba'di? Then what will happen is that he'll do the sajda sahu with the Imam, and that will suffice. That will suffice him for his own sahu. And then afterward, whatever he does, whatever mistakes he makes on his own, then he'll have to reckon with them on his own. وَمَنْ نَسِيَ الرُّكُوعَ وَتَذَكَّرَهُ فِي سُجُودٍ أو في السجود رجع قائما. A person who forgets to make ruku'. So they finish their recitation and they go straight into sajda. And while they're in the sajda, they realize, oh man, I didn't make my ruku' yet. They stand up again. وَيُسْتَحَبُّ لَهُ أَنْ يُعِيدَ شَيْئًا مِنَ الْقِرَاءَةِ ثُمَّ يَرْكَعُ. So they should stand up again, and then they should make the ruku' that they missed. So they backtrack all the way to the last rukun that they did properly, which was the standing, and then they go into ruku' from that position. Why do they make ruku'? Because ruku' is a rukun of the prayer. Why do they have to backtrack? The reason they have to backtrack is one of the arkan of the prayer is that the arkan are all performed in order. So one of the wajib, obligatory parts of the prayer is that all the obligatory elements of the prayer have to be performed in order. So you have to backtrack to the last correct rukun that was performed, and then from there, perform the rukun that was omitted, which in this case is ruku'. Now he adds another mas'ala in the middle, which is that for such a person, it's recommended for them to repeat some part of the recitation that they had made after the Fatiha, or some part of the recitation of the Fatiha for that matter, so that the qiyam, you can have repeated the qiyam in its most perfect form. But again, that's istihbab. It doesn't, the validity seems not to be, at least by al-Akhḍarī's wording here, not to be contingent on doing that. ثُمَّ يَرْكَعُوا. So they repeat some part of the recitation, then they should make the ruku' that they had missed from before. وَيَسْجُدُوا بَعْدَ السَّلَامِ. Then afterward, what happens for this mistake, a person will make sajda sahu after their salam. Why? Because they added a sajda to the prayer that wasn't part of it, because they're going to eventually have to make both sajdas up again, because that sajda that was out of place is not valid. And because they had to add a second standing to the prayer as well, that wasn't initially part of it. So the sahu, the forgetfulness, will mandate a two sajdas after the salam, because that's how you make sajda sahu for addition to the prayer. وَمَنْ نَسِيَ سَجْدَةً وَاحِدَةً تَذَكَّرَهَا بَعْدَ قِيَامِهِ رَجَعَ جَالِسًا وَسَجَدَهَا إِلَّا أَنْ يَكُونَ قَدْ جَلَسَ قَبْلَ الْقِيَامِ فَلَا يُعِيدُ الْجُلُوسِ. Okay, so now he gives another mas'ala, that what if a person forgot one sajda? So they performed one sajda and then afterwards stood up to stand for the next rak'ah. In that case, the person will come back down and sit, and then that person will, from the sitting position, then make the sajda up that they had missed. Unless the person had made one sajda and then started to sit for the tashahhud. In that case, then a person will, from standing, just go straight back into sajda. Now, why is this? There are, again, a number of principles that we learned from before at play here. In the first situation, in the first scenario, where a person made one sajda and stood up again, right? They have to go back down and sit first, and then they have to go back and sit first, and then they have to make sajda, and then they stand. Because the sitting between the two sajdas is also a rukun of the salat. It's a rukun of the prayer. And so they have to catch that rukun first, and then they have to go back to they have to then make the sajda that they missed, and then they stand again. If a person made the tashahhud after the one sajda, and then after standing from the tashahhud they realized, oh my God, I only made one sajda, then the sitting has already been done. They sat for the tashahhud, so that rukun is already performed, and for that reason they just have to go into sajda. فَلَا يُعِيدُ الْجُلُوسِ. There's no need for them to repeat the sitting again. And so in such a situation, again, then afterward a person will be mandated to do the sajda sahu ba'di, make the two prostrations of forgetfulness after the salam, because they added a qiyam to the prayer that wasn't previously part of it. وَمَنْ نَسِيَ سَجْدَتَيْنِ خَرَّ سَاجِدًا. وَلَمْ يَجْلِسْ. So whoever forgot two sajdas, so what would that be like? That would be like a person is reciting the Fatiha, surah after the Fatiha, if such a surah is mandated in that rak'ah. Then they Allahu Akbar, come into ruku', and then Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, and then they started reciting the recitation of the next rak'ah. Such a person will fall straight into sajda. They don't need to sit. They just go straight into sajda. Why? Because the rukun that they're backtracking to that they missed was a sajda. And so because they have to do two sajdas, they're naturally going to have to sit between the two. So there's no need for adding that extra sitting before going into sajda. And so these are all scenarios he's giving in order to help the student understand the principles that are at play. The principle here that is at play is that you have to, if you miss something, you can go back and rectify it, but you have to do it in such a way that make sure that all the arkan, all the wajibat, rukun and wajib are synonyms here. Rukun means like a pillar on which something stands, a weight-bearing pillar. The idea is if you break it, then the entire building falls. And wajib is something that's an obligatory part of the prayer, such a thing that if that obligation isn't rendered, then the prayer isn't valid. At any rate, in both situations, you have to not only make sure that the arkan, if you miss them, that you make them up, but you have to make sure that you make them up in such a way that then will preserve all of them being done in order, even if there are some extra things that intervene between arkan that really aren't supposed to be there. It says, وَيَسْجُدُ فِي جَمِيعِ ذَلِكَ بَعْدَ السَّلَامِ. So all of these previous issues of sajda that we mentioned, in all of those cases a person will make the sajda sahu, they're mandated to do the prostration of forgetfulness for addition, which is after the salam of the prayer, because all of them involve involve a scenario which end up in a net addition of performances to the prayer from what their regular number of performances are. وإن تذكر السجود بعد رفع رأسه وإن تذكر السجود بعد رفع رأسه من الركعة التي تليها تمادى على صلاته ولم يرجع وألغى ركعة السهو وزاد ركعة في موضعها بانيا وسجد قبل السلام إن كانت من الأوليين وتذكرها بعد عقد الثالثة وبعد السلام إن لم يكن من الأوليين أو كانت منهما وتذكر قبل عقد الثالثة لأن السورة والجلوس لم يفوتا. So this is now another set of scenarios that he brings that may be a little bit more difficult for a person to understand right away, but inshallah, if we just talk through it a little bit and we think about it, it's not really all that complicated. Conceptually, it's not complicated at all. Which is that, what if a person remembers that they forgot a sajda after having raised their head from the completion of the raka'ah afterward? So, a person forgets one of the sajdas in their first raka'ah, and then they remember, or they all of a sudden become aware that I only made one sajda in the first raka'ah, but this awareness happens after the second one is done, once after they've started the third, or anywhere between then and the end of the prayer, or even theoretically after the end of the prayer. What does that person do? That person in that case is mandated to just keep praying, just keep going straight through the prayer, and what they will conceive of in their mind is that first rak'ah that they prayed that lacked a sajda in it, that first rak'ah is now invalid. And then the second rak'ah of their prayer becomes the first, and then the third rak'ah of the prayer becomes the second, and then the fourth rak'ah of the prayer becomes the third, and then they pray one extra, what seems like a fifth rak'ah, but it's the fourth valid rak'ah. And what will happen is then they'll finish the prayer and make sajda sahu after the salam. What's the problem with this? The problem with this is that because a person it will have come to their attention that they invalidated a rak'ah of their prayer in a way that will disrupt the order of two things. One is disrupt the order of the surah after the Fatiha, and saying that out loud or saying that quietly. So, which the surah has to be said either out loud or quietly. So those are two sunnah mu'akkadas that have been disrupted by this forgetfulness, which causes one of the rak'at to be cancelled in its validity. And then the second issue is that it will cause them to then make the tashahhud. Both of the tashahuds and the sittings for both of the tashahuds, which are both separate sunnah mu'akkadas of the prayer, it will cause those things to be performed in the wrong rak'ah, in the odd numbered rak'at, other than Maghrib obviously, but in the odd numbered rak'at, and then to be omitted in the even numbered rak'at where they belong. And so because these errors, if they happen in a 4 rak'ah prayer, if they happen before the second rak'ah, and but they're only caught after the performance of the third, they will result in the possible omission of up to 4 sunnah mu'akkadas of the prayer. Basically between 2 and 4 sunnah mu'akkadas of the prayer. What will happen is that because a person will obviously add a 5th rak'ah, which is the 4th valid one, but in form it will be a 5th rak'ah, given that one of them will be cancelled because it lacks a sajda in it. You have additions and you have omissions. And according to the principle we said from before, which is that addition and omission, whenever they come together, the omission will take priority over the addition and will swallow it up in terms of the way you make sajda sahu. So the qabli always will suffice for qabli and ba'di, in a way that the qabli cannot suffice for the ba'di unless a person only remembers after they made the salām, which is what we mentioned in a previous lesson. And so on purpose you can't make it suffice like that. So if a person omitted these 2 or more sunnah mu'akkadas with regards to the recitation of a surah after the Fatiha and then reciting it loud or quiet, and with regards to the tashahhud, the saying of the tashahhud, the words of the tashahhud, as well as the sitting for the duration of the tashahhud, if a person performs the mistake before the 3rd rak'ah starts, but they catch the mistake after the 3rd rak'ah starts, then that person will need to make a sajda sahu qabli, because they will have missed some sunnah mu'akkadas along the way. Whereas if they perform the mistake after the 3rd rak'ah, then the sajda sahu, they'll do the same thing in the sense that the invalid rak'ah will be considered to be cancelled, and the person will go on to add another rak'ah to the prayer, a 5th one in some sense, but it's the 4th complete and 4th valid one. Because now the prayer doesn't lack any sunnah mu'akkadas that were supposed to be performed properly, but it still has this extra fraction of a rak'ah that was performed that ends up being deemed invalid because of it lacking a rukun of the prayer. For that reason, in this case, the sajda sahu will be after the salām, if that makes sense. And then you can go back and listen to that again, inshallah, because it is a lot to keep track of in your head. But you can go back and listen to it again. Maybe we would benefit from just reciting or reading the text again. وإن تذكر السجود بعد رفع رأسه من الركعة التي تليها تمادى على صلاته ولم يرجع وألغى ركعة السهو وزاد ركعة في موضعها بانيا والسجد قبل السلام إن كانت من الأوليين وتذكر بعد عقد الثالثة وبعد السلام إن لم تكن من الأوليين أو كانت منهما ولكن تذكر قبل عقد الثالثة لأن السورة والجلوس لم يفوتا. So that's hopefully hearing that again in the context of the explanation that was just given will be helpful and beneficial. So we go on to the next mas'ala. وَمَنْ سَلَّمَ شَاكًا فِي كَمَالِ صَلَاتِهِ بَطَلَتْ صَلَاتُهُ. He says that whoever makes salam from the prayer and they're not sure that they prayed the complete prayer, that person, their salat is invalid. Why? If you have a doubt whether you prayed 3 or 4, the sunnah is to what? Pray an extra rak'ah and then to do sajda sahu ba'di afterward. Why? Because as the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam indicates, that if a person thought they prayed 3, if they pray another one, or they have the doubt if they prayed 3 or 4, if they pray another rak'ah and it turned out that they had only prayed 3, then what happened? It turned out that they had prayed 4. Then what happens is that the extra rak'ah they prayed, so they prayed 4, they thought maybe I prayed 3 or 4, and so they end up praying a 5th rak'ah, and then they do the sajda sahu ba'di after the salam. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam indicated in such a case, a person should not pay mind and should not feel bad, because the extra rak'ah they prayed will then be combined with the sajda sahu, which consists of 2 sajdas and a tashahhud. But Allah Ta'ala will count it as an extra complete rak'ah, and those 2 rak'at will count as a nafil for the person who forgot. Whereas if they had only prayed 3, it turned out they actually had only prayed 3, then they have, in this such a way, by praying an extra rak'ah, they will have completed their prayer, and the 2 sajdas will be targhim. It will be like a kind of like a punch in the face for shaitan, or something happens to shaitan that he dislikes. Now, I'd like to remind us again that this is the hukum for those who this happens to relatively rarely. That if they try, their best to focus on the prayer. One thing is, if you're praying mindlessly, you could be the most mentally healthy person in the world and you're still gonna have doubts about all sorts of things because you're not paying attention. But when you try to pay attention, generally you can get through this with, some mistakes or some distractions happening every now and then, but generally you can reliably get through your salat when you pay attention. This is the rule for those people, which are the overwhelming majority of people. Some people have a mental health issue that they deal with, and a struggle that they deal with, and a challenge that they have, which is that no matter how much they try to focus, or maybe even sometimes when they try really hard to focus, they always are plagued with wasawis, with kind of like obsessive compulsive misgivings. Did I pray 3 or did I pray 4? Even though it's very clear that they've prayed 4. Those people, this is not the hukum for them. The hukum for them was mentioned earlier in the text, which is that for those people, they will pray they will ignore their wasawis, they will ignore their misgivings, and they will make a sajda sahu after the salam. They ignore their misgivings because the misgivings are kind of a false signal, so they should ignore them, and it helps them get over those challenges. And they make a sajda sahu afterward as a reassurance that I'm okay, that my prayer is still valid and everything is okay. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala rasulihi sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. This is a lot, so we'll break this up into 2 recordings so a person can try to take it in, and then we'll finish the text in the next recording. Wassalamu alaikum.